All right, we're going to start with an easy one. What is your name and what is your title?
My name is David Devine, and I'm a Senior Product Director for Cannondale.
And David, you worked on the development of the Synapse with SmartSense, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. This is actually the third Synapse that I've worked on for Cannondale.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about how the idea for SmartSense came about, how long you guys were talking about it, and what the collaboration with Garmin and Lezyne was like.
I mean, we've been kicking around kind of the concept for this bike, I would say, over the last 5 or 6 years, something like that. It really started to solidify about 3 years ago. This really started because we noticed that participation in road riding was changing. We saw a huge boom in gravel, and road riders were articulating to us that they were concerned about road safety, their posture on the road. And so we wanted to do our part to, out of the box, provide a solution that made people feel more confident and more aware and more visible while they're riding.
Mm-hmm. And tell me a little bit about what the discussions were in terms of what to include that would be useful for the rider and what would not be useful. I mean, were there things that you guys thought about that maybe didn't make the cut?
I mean, there's a whole host of things that you can put on your bike that are powered by batteries or can talk to each other over Bluetooth. In our launching this product, we really focused on what we thought the essentials were for awareness and visibility. So kind of the core needs, and they're the things that, as we surveyed and interviewed riders, those are the things that people were using most commonly that we could integrate in together, but then also allow them to communicate with each other to kind of create more than a sum of the parts type thing.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about the other advancements in the Synapse design that, you know, SmartSense has sort of taken the spotlight, but there's other advancements and other refinements. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, I mean, SmartSense has allowed us to kind of take a step back also on the frame platform and evaluate what's important to riders, what people value, and kind of what the checklist is for somebody that wants to just get out for a road ride. So you'll see some format changes on this bike versus the previous Synapse. We have gone to a lighter frame than our previous carbon level frame, which is quite nice. Improved both the head tube and the bottom bracket stiffness. But core, like what somebody is that's riding an endurance road bike, tire clearance has been bumped up. So this one will take about a 36 millimeter tire with plenty of clearance. And for riders here in the Northeast, or even maybe out there in Colorado, this makes a really great all-road bike then too, where you can start to ride some big surface stuff and get off the pavement a bit.
Yeah, yeah. And there were some aerodynamic refinements, correct?
Yeah, so some of the learnings out of System 6 and Super 6 and just basic truncated airfoils, we brought those over into to Synapse. There's places where you can do it without having it kind of hamper either weight or performance of the bike, and we did it everywhere that it makes sense in that case.
Sure, sure. Is there anything in the works for the Synapse system to communicate directly with drivers, with cars? I know some of that technology is starting to exist. You know, I know car manufacturers have started to work on that. Did that enter the discussions at all in development?
It's definitely, I'd say, like a North Star, this bicycle to vehicle communication, something that would allow both drivers to be aware of bikes, but also bikes to be aware of drivers. We've started off with technology that is kind of independent and owned by the cyclist, which doesn't require a certain amount of technology within the car. But that's definitely a North Star that both the auto industry as well as the bike industry are going to work to over the coming decades.
Mm-hmm. And again, the one of the backlashes so far to the Synapse has been, you know, integration coming with a bike. A lot of people have sort of said, "Well, I don't want that. I want to choose my own things." Is there going to be any sort of options for customizability in the future for people who buy the Synapse?
Yes, I think that type of reaction is natural with any new technology, especially in bikes when we've had such kind of long-standing norms. There's certain choices that we made in the design of the bike, like the friction flange or GoPro style mounting for the lights and things like that. that will allow us to be able to build out that system in the future, or even welcome in other people if they want. So we chose some rather universal mountings that will allow us to either build out the system in the future or offer different specs in the future without boxing somebody into, let's say, a dedicated handlebar or a dedicated seat post or anything like that. So some of those choices were a lot around being able to introduce a system, take on feedback from both people that buy it and don't buy it, and then to be able to evolve that. We see a really long runway for something like this, and we wanted to have it be something that we could build out as time goes on.
You collaborated with Garmin to develop the radar system in the SmartSense. Is it basically just a Varia system, standard Varia system, or were there some customizations that were required to integrate it into the overall SmartSense?
Yeah, so it's really similar to a Garmin Varia radar system. We've actually used a similar Varia unit on some of our e-bikes as well. So on both the Movaro and the Adventure Neo, we've used this similar unit. Where this one differs just a little bit is it's got an onboard kind of computer chip for communicating on CAN bus language, and what that allows us to do is have the radar manipulate flashing patterns in the lights. So versus a standard radar, this one is able to communicate with external things and kind of manipulate light patterns and things like that.
Gotcha. And you developed the lights in conjunction with Lezyne, correct?
Correct, yeah.
And again, is that sort of Lezyne's stock technology, or were there other modifications to make it work with SmartSense?
Yeah, so Jeremiah Bubar on our side was heavily involved on the light development, and we did a mixture of things with the lights. We used some existing parts that Lezyne had, but then there was definitely some customization that was needed for the level of intelligence and then meeting the brightness and flashing requirements, as well as some of the connectors. So I'd say it's like in line with product that they have, but there are definitely modifications that were needed. The rear light is a dedicated unit. It was designed around really tucking up underneath the saddle so that it had a particular shape, and then also allowing the radar to nest up into it as well.
Right. And for those who have not seen the bike in person, and I'm looking at it over here, this is a wired system, correct?
Yeah, it is.
And it wires to sort of I guess you would call it like a mounting position on the down tube where the battery sits, but the battery is removable.
Yeah, we call it kind of informally the Cradle. And the Cradle is both something that has the brains of the system in it and the Bluetooth radio and ANT radio. That's one of the reasons why that Cradle sits somewhat externally of the bike, is so that it can have a really strong radio signal. And then the battery sits on top of that, and it's easily removable for charging or replacing if you have more than one battery. The wired side of it is all about having all of these devices that are able to be powered and charged off that single battery, but then also about repeatability and use and relying a little bit less on 5 or 6 different Bluetooth connections, and instead maybe one connection to the phone, one connection to the head unit, and then everything else happens really quickly, really repeatedly over that wired connection.
I want to talk briefly about the battery. There's been a lot of talk recently about the environmental friendliness of batteries in general. Can you talk a little bit about where you got the batteries, where you source them, what kind of batteries they are, and whether they are recyclable at the end of their lives?
Yeah, so Garmin did all of the battery development on the project. At a base case, I would say that they're a really common cell that's used in e-bike batteries, that's used in light electric vehicles, that's used in even automotive in some cases. Common cell that would be something that would be able to be recycled at its end of life. But yeah, we anticipate that these are going to get used for quite a long time, and the rechargeability is definitely part of that cycle.
Now, for anybody considering buying the Synapse, what would be your message to them briefly? Who is the customer for this? Why would it benefit you? What's the advantage of the Synapse over any other option that you can get out there?
Yeah, so our road line, we split it up into 3 main categories. We make race bikes, endurance bikes, and gravel bikes. And the Synapse is an endurance bike that is designed for people that just want to enjoy road riding. Our race bikes are for people that are either past bike racers or people that are pinning on a number today, and gravel bikes are obviously designed for riding on gravel and stuff like that. But those endurance bikes are for people that are interested in pushing their personal limits, in achieving new things on a bike, and getting out with friends, or even just getting out alone and kind of clear their head. And the real advantage of Synapse is that we've done a lot of the thinking and selecting of the tools for you, and then provided you with radar for peace of mind. And all you have to do is just go enjoy riding bikes. And that's kind of, I would say that's the big appeal of the bike. Once you've used it, you realize that you can really focus on what you enjoy about riding bikes. For me, it's the sound of tires through a corner and being able to pick the next gear and stuff like that. And I don't have to worry about who's passing me or who can see me when I'm riding Synapse.
Right on. Thank you, David Devine. I appreciate your time. And for those of you listening, if you have questions, David, where can people reach out to you or to Cannondale on social media?
Yeah, we're Ride Cannondale on Instagram and Twitter. And then I think if you're using a telephone, 1-800-BIKE-USA.
What's a telephone? David, thanks a lot. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.